Okay, fine. I can wait no longer. It's time to build a Bladesinger wizard using the 2024 rules for D&D 5e. I'm so excited. Welcome to D4. Hey everybody, so here at D4, each week we take a deep dive into character builds for our favorite role-playing games. I like to crunch numbers about them and theory craft about them, not so that I can tell you the right way or the best way to play a character, but to explore one potential way to build something in the hopes of creating a character that's both really powerful, but also really fun to play. So if you enjoy creating characters for your favorite role-playing games, or if you just like to maybe theory craft about character creation, or if you're looking for tips or ideas on how to build something that you're thinking about playing, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I'm so glad you're here, so thank you for watching. My name's Colby. Okay, yes. In case you are relatively new to the channel, the Bladesinger wizard is kind of my little darling. I've said many times that playing one is the most fun I've ever had with a character in 5e, where I love them so much that I've actually played them in 2 complete campaigns, not to mention a number of one-shots, and early on in the channel's history, my Bladesinger 2.0 build was sort of the first video I ever had that kind of blew up, or at least compared to any other video that I had done up until that point. Before Baldur's Gate 3 came out, it was take a drink. It was my most ever viewed video, and actually still has more views than any non-BG3 video on the channel, though it looks like that might be overtaken soon by my every change to every class and subclass vid from a couple months ago. Oh, and that's 2 drinks now, if you're playing the BG3 drinking game at home. So yes, it's not surprising that the most common request I've been getting over the last couple of months from viewers is to do a Bladesinger build using the 2024 rules. And I've been putting it off because, I mean, we've got all these shiny new toys to play with, and I've been wanting to play with them, and I still do, but also I miss my old toys too. I miss my Snake Eyes. And hey, now it's kind of like Snake Eyes got a new Uzi and a katana, right? And like a new model of Timber. That's his pet wolf, for those of you who don't know. So it feels kind of new still, right? And for those asking, yes, I do think I will go back from time to time and update some of those older builds with 2024 rules, not just this one. Maybe starting with the more popular ones, right? But no, I'm not going to make that my primary focus. I still want to mostly build around the new and updated subclasses, at least for a little while. But yeah. With the Bladesinger, I can put off building one no longer. So let's do it. I proudly present D&D episode number 185, the 2024 Bladesinger. Huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he created for this character. He does this every week. This one is, I really love the pigtails on this one in particular. So cool. If you would be interested in following Randall on social media to see the other stuff he's done, or to potentially try and commission him to create some art for your character or your entire party, I'll put links in the video description as always on how to do so. And also first, I want to give a big shout out to one of the best third-party content creators in the world, the sponsor for today's video, Roll for Combat, and their latest Kickstarter, Zoo Bestiary Elemental Storm. This project has destroyed its funding goal, as all Roll for Combat books do. So they are greenlit, they're going to press, and truly deserve a place in your TTRPG library. At the time of this video's release, there is only 1 week left on the Kickstarter, so do not delay backing them. Check them out. For those unfamiliar with the Zoo Bestiary books, they're pretty cool, they're pretty unique. They take submissions from aspiring monster designers all over the world, and they put each submission through a very rigorous 2-round judging process. First, the public ranks the monsters, and then industry professionals kind of score the entries after they've been whittled down on a number of criteria, and then the cream of the crop makes it into the Bestiary book, where each monster shows up with the name of the person who created them, as well as the award and rank that they've earned. The latest of these Bestiary books, yes, is this Elemental Storm Bestiary. Now, importantly, everything in the book is compatible with both the 2024 rules of D&D, the 2014 rules of D&D, and Pathfinder 2e. But also, you've got to understand, with this book, not only are you getting 170 plus incredible, gorgeous, horrifying monsters, all based around the elements, not just the elements of earth, air, fire, and water, of course, but also the elements of music and space and time, among others. So much variety. But not only are you getting an incredible bestiary, you also get new Monster Hunter rules in this book that can be used with any class or subclass, emulating dynamic abilities from your favorite monster hunting games where you're like climbing onto massive monsters to get past their defenses, attacking specific body parts to take them down like one piece at a time, right? As well as dozens of new elemental-based spells, and even Roll for Combat's fantastic monster parts crafting system, which I love. This lets you take pieces of the monsters that you've defeated and craft gear and infuse items with elemental magic that you have gleaned from your foes. Oh, and every single creature in the book even has an animated token created for it, compatible with just about every VTT out there. So I hope that you'll take a moment to check out this Kickstarter and give it your support. And if you're watching this video after the Kickstarter has ended, you should still check them out and pre-order the book, because it's available for pre-order and it will go to press. It might already be published by the time you're watching this. I'm confident that you'll love the book. When you do visit them, please use the URL that I've put in the video description and the pinned comment so that they know I sent you. Thanks so much. And thanks so much to Roll for Combat for sponsoring both this video and all the videos that you guys have sponsored over the years. I truly appreciate you. Love what you're doing. Please don't stop. Okay, let's get back to the build. At level 1 for our starting class, yes, the meme lives on. We are going fighter. No, you don't have to, but as much as I almost hate to say it, a fighter dip with the 2024 rules is arguably even better, at least for a lot of builds, than it was under the 2014 rules. But wait, you might be saying, I thought you were beholden to spreadsheets. Isn't going Bladesinger but delaying extra attack going to really hurt your level 6 damage report? Actually, not really, or at least not by much. In fact, our damage will be about the same at level 6 with a fighter dip as it would be if we had just gone straight wizard, thanks to weapon masteries and fighting styles. But levels 1 through 5 are way better. And then, of course, there's the weapon proficiencies. And most important of all, Constitution saving throw proficiency that we just want so badly. If you can't multi-class, or you don't want to, no worries. You'll be better off as a Bladesinger than a lot of other gishes, but Fighter 1 is too good for me to pass up here. For our species, I think I'm gonna go with Goliath today. I'm tempted to go human for another origin feat. I'd really love to have 2, or halfling for luck, or sure elf because Bladesinger, elven accuracy, but I think I like Goliath best here because I want more sources of advantage. And yes, as a Goliath, among other things, we get to choose a giant ancestry, and I would want to take the hill giant ancestry, which lets us just knock a large or smaller enemy prone, proficiency bonus times per day, when we hit them with an attack. No saving throw, no nothing. And even though we can only do it a limited number of times per day, it's some really nice on-demand advantage, right? Because as a melee character, which we will be, we're going to get advantage attacking those prone enemies when we're within 5 feet. We'll talk about this a little more later on, and sure, you could take a different species if you want, but this is probably my favorite for this build. And yeah, I kind of love the idea of going against the cliche here, right? A nimble and intelligent character who's descended, at least in part, from hill giants? What does that look like in game? Answer, cool. That's what it looks like. Freaking awesome. As for our background, I am going to say, maybe more than any build I've done yet, I really want to almost insist on either taking a custom background or using an old one from an old book so that you can choose your origin feat and ability score bonuses. Of the predetermined list that we get in the new player's handbook, there just isn't one that gives me bumps to the ability scores that I want and the origin feat that I want. And that bugs me. But I'm not going to rant about it this time. If you can't take an old or custom background, I think I'd probably go with guide. But assuming you can, for your origin feat, I think I'd probably take lucky. Why lucky? Because it lets you just choose to have advantage on a d20 roll, proficiency bonus times per day. And again, I'm trying to gather as many sources of advantage as I can here. I don't see this as necessary by any means, however. And yes, there are great options here if you want to consider them. Alert, I would especially love to have, but of course, Magic Initiate Druid is one that a lot of you would want, and that's why I suggested the guide background. Magic Initiate Druid would let us learn 2 cantrips and 1 first level spell from the Druid spell list, though we could choose intelligence for our casting ability for those spells, which is great. This would let us get guidance and probably Goodberry for some nice backup healing and utility, but the one a lot of people would really want here would be Shillelagh. I haven't used Shillelagh in a 2024 build yet. That kind of surprises me, actually. Probably some of you too. It's a great spell. It takes a bonus action to cast, it lasts 1 minute, and then enhances a club or a quarterstaff so that you can use your casting stat for your plus to hit and damage, as well as causing the weapon now in 2024 to do more damage than it otherwise would. It's a D8 for now, but it scales, eventually up to 2D6. And the idea of a little club doing as much damage as a greatsword is pretty cool, right? To say nothing of letting you use your intelligence here, for us anyways, to hit and damage, yeah? That said, I'm actually not going to assume that we're using this spell for this build. Sorry. As much as I'd love to build a sad, intelligence-focused Bladesinger, there are some problems with trying to use this spell. I'll get into it a little more later, but particularly at early levels, it's just fine. If you want to pump intelligence instead of dexterity, it's not worthless. I can see us using it, but yeah, just hang tight. We'll get into it more in a minute. For our starting ability scores, I assume that we go the point buy method as always and say, let's go 15 dexterity and a +2 from our background, a 15 intelligence and a +1, so we've got a 16 there, right? And then a 14 constitution. For our starting equipment, let's grab studded leather, a scimitar, and a short sword. And yes, we will be dual wielding naturally, and those weapons are the best for us since they are light and finesse, letting us dual wield and attack with our dexterity, assuming we're not using Shillelagh. At level 1 fighter then, we get 3 weapon masteries. We get to pick 3 weapons and enjoy the weapon masteries for them. This is great. It means we could take short sword to enjoy Vex, letting us have advantage on our next attack if we hit with that short sword, right? Also the scimitar, so we could get Nick, letting us make that offhand weapon attack we get when dual wielding light weapons as part of our action, instead of having to spend our bonus action for it, yeah, which is so wonderful. And one of my favorite things about the 2024 rules, if I'm being honest. And then, sure, grab the club for your 3rd mastery if you want. If you're going to go Shillelagh, you could enjoy the slow mastery with the club, letting us slow our targets by 10 feet. Super handy. We get a fighting style at fighter 1, and for damage purposes, yes, we're going to want to take the 2-weapon fighting style so that we can add our dexterity modifier to the attack we make with that offhand scimitar. Nice little bump. And then we get second wind, which we can use twice per day now to recover some hit points with a bonus action, though we get 1 use of it back with a short rest. But at level 2, I need to pause and give a huge thank you and shout out to my channel members. Really quick, you guys, thank you so much for your support. I could not do this without you. It means a lot to me, it really does. And everybody else who's not a member of the channel, I'd really appreciate it if you'd consider joining. There's a little button down there that says join. Click on it and it will just tell you what kind of benefits you can get by being a member. Anything from access to the library of write-ups that I create for each of these builds so that you can recreate them yourself a little more easily, right? To access to the D4 community Discord server, and even access to the live monthly Q&A hangout sessions that we do. Thanks for considering, and if you can't or don't want to be a member, that's totally fine. Just watching and liking and subscribing and clicking the notifications bell, etc., all of the things, these are actually great ways to support the channel as well. So I appreciate you just for doing any and or all of those. But no, at level 2, we can delay no longer. Our guard or mercenary or city watch champion has developed a keen interest in the arcane, and specifically, maybe they've uncovered a way to enhance their already formidable martial prowess through the art and study of magic, passed down through ancient elven tradition. We've got to start taking wizard levels now. This means that as a wizard one, we get the brand new ritual adept feature, which is really not new. It's just sort of given its own kind of class feature status. It just says that we can cast any spell with a ritual tag as a ritual if it's just in our spellbook, right? We don't have to prepare it. We can just read it from our spellbook. We could do this anyways, and it's one nice benefit about being a wizard, and it hasn't gone away, even though every class now gets access to ritual spells. Arcane Recovery hasn't changed either that we get at this level. It lets us just recover spent spell slots after a short rest, equal to half our wizard level, rounded up once per day. No higher than 5th level, right? But speaking of spells, yes, we get spells here, of course, and as a wizard, as always, we're gonna have a ton of options. Let's talk cantrips first. I love Mind Sliver for a little damage and to potentially reduce an enemy's saving throw. I'd grab another ranged offensive cantrip here probably though, like Firebolt, but Poison Spray is a lot better than it used to be now. Toll the Dead is always decent, but if your table allows for older content, be sure and grab Booming Blade and or Green Flame Blade so that you can make a weapon attack with them and add a little extra damage on top of the weapon attack after character level 5 anyways, plus some more damage if they move in the case of Booming Blade or to an enemy standing next to your target in the case of Green Flame Blade. Okay, speaking of weapon attacks that do extra damage, what about True Strike? This got a fantastic update in 2024. It now lets you make a weapon attack when you cast it, similar to Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade, but using your spellcasting ability as the plus to hit and damage. That's awesome. It even scales up in damage like cantrips do, basically doing an extra d6 at 5, 11, and 17, right? Aren't we taking this? Couldn't we be a sad, intelligence-focused dual wielder between this and Shillelagh? What is wrong with you? Okay, let's pause for a moment and dive into how this may or may not work. I'm seeing some people suggest that if you were like a Valor Bard or an Eldritch Knight or a Bladesinger, all of which get the ability to, once they get the extra attack feature right, the ability to do the following if you had access to Shillelagh and True Strike, as well as weapon masteries. Dual wield a club and a scimitar. Both light weapons, put Shillelagh on the club and make an attack with it, then cast the True Strike cantrip as part of your attack action, right, that you get as a Bladesinger or Valor Bard or Eldritch Knight, but do that with the scimitar that you're holding in your offhand. Since that scimitar is a light weapon with the Nick mastery and you're making an attack with it, using your action, it would qualify for the dual wielding light weapons stuff, and you could therefore make a third attack as part of your action with your Shillelagh club, and all of this could be done with your spell casting ability modifier for your plus to hit and damage rather than strength or dexterity. I would love it if it worked that way. I can see a lot of tables saying that it's fine, and if you play at one of those tables, then that's great. Focus on intelligence instead of dexterity here and knock yourself out, or more likely, knock your enemies out. I even jumped on a call with Chris at Treant Monk to kind of hash this out, and I think we're pretty much on the same page here. We can see the argument, but we don't really think it works rules as written, unfortunately. Casting a cantrip, even if it's part of your attack action, thanks to like the Bladesinger's special extra attack, still isn't the same thing as making the attack of the light property that the Nick mastery says we have to do in order to make a Nick weapon attack as part of our action. It's nuanced. Again, I can see it being allowed, but until I see like a ruling from someone at Wizards of the Coast on this, or maybe get some strong evidence that most tables would allow it, I'll probably avoid trying to do this in a build. Not that I'm always the strictest adherer to rules as written. I mean, heck, I'm gonna break a couple rules later in this build, but I try to only do that when it seems like that's the way the majority of tables actually play, and I just don't feel confident about making that call with the whole dual wielding with Shillelagh and True Strike thing quite yet. All of that said, True Strike can still be nice, especially if you can't use Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade. Oh, and I should add, while Shillelagh is awesome, the fact that it takes a bonus action to cast and only lasts for 1 minute makes it practically unusable on this build that's going to have a massive bonus action traffic jam, as we'll see. If we could just cast Shillelagh as a reaction when we make our first attack or something, I would consider it a lot more strongly, but needing a bonus action to get it going when we're gonna have to use so many bonus actions to get stuff going is just makes it pretty prohibitive. Okay, phew. As for the first level spells that I would grab here, yes, I would say Find Familiar for some nice utility and to potentially get advantage on our first attack on our turn. Speaking of not necessarily adhering to rules as written. Shield, of course, for a reaction buff to our armor class when we get hit. And I really love the updated version of Sleep, which affects potentially multiple targets in a small radius, right? Causing them to be first incapacitated on a failed save and then straight up unconscious on a second fail, but without the hit point cap that it used to have, which made it pretty worthless after a very early game, right? Okay, level 3, we would be a wizard 2, and we get a new wizard feature here, Scholar, which basically gives us expertise, but we have a limited option of skills to choose from. We can choose one of them that we're proficient in and double our proficiency bonus for it. I'd probably take investigation here, as I think it comes up more often in campaigns, but Arcana might be the better choice. Feels more wizardy, if nothing else. Go ahead and PYF here, pick your favorite. But yeah, that's really all we get at Wizard 2 other than another first level spell slot. It is a fairly painful level compared to 2014 where we used to get our subclass, so just hang on for one more level. Good news, you're still a wizard, so you've got that. And hey, with a 1-level fighter dip, we're a pretty strong melee combatant. We've got the shield spell, we've got sleep, we've got find familiar, we're good. But at level 4, we would be a wizard 3, and this is where we get our subclass now, right? Just like all classes in the 2024 rules. And yes, we're taking blade singing, and nothing has changed, of course, because it didn't get updated in the new player's handbook. And I gotta say that while at first I was a little sad about the snub, I'm not sure in the end that I actually am very sad about it. It's like, okay, sure, if you're gonna buff it, throw it in there, but if you're gonna give it the mercy monk treatment and the only thing you do is nerf it, then no thank you. So maybe I'd rather be safe than sorry in this instance and just say, hey, okay, fine, they didn't include it, I can still use it. But let's review the Bladesinger features here for those who could use a refresher. First up, we get training in war and song, which gives us proficiency in light armor and a single weapon. But we don't need that because we're fighter 1, right? We also get proficiency in the performance skill though, so a little ribbon. But then there's the key feature, Blade Song. This says that proficiency bonus times per day as a bonus action. Here we go. We can start our blade song and it lasts for 1 minute as long as we're not wearing medium or heavy armor or using a shield or using 2 hands to make a weapon attack. And for those who wonder, no, this does not prohibit dual wielding. You just can't use both hands at the same time to make a single attack, right? In other words, no two-handed weapons. While Blade Song is active, we get an AC bump and a concentration check bump equal to our intelligence. That's fantastic. Coupled with Constitution saving throw proficiency from starting as a fighter, our concentration is really pretty solid now. Even if we don't take Warcaster, we'd be at a +7 right now, +8 next level, right? And with studded leather, we're at an 18 armor class when Blade Song is active. 19 if we were to use mage armor instead, so yeah, mage armor is a little better, but assuming we get magical armor at some point here, I'd just as soon save the spell slot for the shield spell, if nothing else, which would put our studded leather selves at 23 AC when we need it, right? Fantastic. But on top of that, Blade Song increases our speed by 10 feet and even gives us advantage on acrobatics checks. It is the perfect and quintessential lithe, dexterous spellsword ability, and I love it with all of my heart. But wait, there's more. Because we also get second level spells here, right? Wizard 3, best level ever. And sure, Web and Misty Step are so good and worth taking, and there's a bunch of others too, but the 3 that I would prioritize personally for this build would be Mirror Image first. This spell just got a massive buff in 2024. It used to say that when an enemy tried to hit you, they had a chance to attack your illusory image instead. But those illusory images had an atrocious AC, so sometimes an attack roll that would have missed you anyway would end up destroying one of your images and making it feel pretty worthless. Now, the spell says that if you get hit, meaning your higher, better armor class gets hit, well, then you roll to see if the attack instead hits one of your duplicates. And if it does, no damage to you and your duplicate gets poofed, right? Really solid defense options. You've got 3 of them. It does take an action to cast though, and it only lasts 1 minute. So nice to have, but not nice to have to cast at the beginning of combat unless you are really concerned about survivability. On round 1, you could Blade Song with your bonus action and then get Mirror Image going with your action, but you haven't done any damage. You know, there might be times maybe you're too far away and you're trying to kind of get into position, whatever. Or you just know that it's going to be a really tough and drawn out fight. As for the second spell, yes, of course, I'm taking Shadow Blade. I have to, because it's even better now. Not because the spell is better. It didn't even make the 2024 Player's Handbook, so it's exactly the same. But it's better thanks to the new rules. We'll get into it more during the damage report, but as a refresher, yes, you cast the spell as a bonus action. It summons a gloomy sword of magic that counts as a light finesse weapon that you have proficiency with and can even be thrown. The reason I love this spell so much, aside from the awesome feel and lightsabery flavor, is the incredible 2d8 damage it does on every single hit that scales up to 3d8 next level and 1d8 more for every 2 levels, you upcast it after that. So no bump at 4th level, but a bump at 5th, right? Oh, and don't forget, we also have advantage on the attacks if we're in dim light or darkness. Now, of course, there are drawbacks to this spell. It uses our concentration. It takes a bonus action to summon it. And perhaps most damningly, especially at higher levels, it doesn't ever get like a +1 or a +2 to hit and damage modifier that you would get from magic weapons that you could be finding along the way. What's more, in 2024, weapons have weapon masteries, not Shadowblade. So it might even be more questionable to use it now than it ever has been, right? I'm still going to assume that we're using it because I love it so much, but yeah, it's far from a no-brainer. As for the 3rd second level spell that I'd want to prioritize here, it's Magic Weapon. I love this spell in 2024 because not only does it no longer require concentration, but it also scales more quickly than before. You cast it as a bonus action and it makes a non-magical weapon a +1 magical weapon, scaling to +2 with a 3rd level spell slot and +3 as a 6th level spell slot. Do I assume we're using it when I crunch numbers? Man, I wish I could cast it on our Shadowblade, but Shadowblade is specifically called a magic sword in the spell description, so I'd allow it, sure. Maybe your DM would too, but it's definitely not rules as written. We could put it on our scimitar though, and I mean, sure, in the interest of exploring what's possible damage-wise, I suppose I'll assume we're doing that when I crunch numbers, though it may be ill-advised. The damage increase is pretty minor, so it's not going to throw off our numbers by much, and I mean, heck, you might have a magic scimitar that you're using in your offhand anyways, in which case the numbers are going to be even more accurate than otherwise. In-game, though, yeah, I can't imagine actually using a 2nd level spell slot for this. Not at this level. But hey, it lasts an hour, and maybe you only have 1 or 2 combat encounters per day, or you're going up against the boss and you need every edge you can get. Anyways, at level 5, we would be a wizard 4, and that means we get our first general feat, and I'm going to take dual wielder for a couple of reasons. First, it now is a half feat like all general feats, bumping my dexterity to 18, awesome. But most importantly, especially for this build, it's going to let me make another attack on my turn as a bonus action, and yes, this is in addition to the additional offhand nick attack that I was already making with my scimitar. I know the wording can be confusing, and I know not everyone agrees on how we should interpret the way 2-weapon fighting with a different light weapon in each hand interacts with the dual wielder feat, but as per an admittedly off-the-record conversation with Jeremy Crawford at Gen Con, it works in the following way, and until he or someone else from Wizards of the Coast wants to release an official statement to the contrary, this is how I'm going to assume it works. If you're using 2 light weapons to make attacks, which we are with the Shadowblade and the Scimitar, and one of them has the Nick Mastery, Scimitar does, and you have access to that mastery, then on your turn you can make an attack with 1 weapon, our Shadowblade, an attack with the Nick weapon, the Scimitar, both with our action, right? And then if you have the dual wielder feat, yet another attack with one of your weapons with our bonus action. So 3 attacks on our turn, and yeah, once we get extra attack, it would be 4 total. And also, yes, if you have the 2-weapon fighting style, you can add the damage to even that bonus action dual wielder attack, though the verbiage seems to indicate that you couldn't. The intent here seems to be that the 2-weapon fighting style that we got at Fighter 1, right? The damage from that fighting style overrules what the dual wielder feat verbiage says. You might decide to rule this differently at your table, and if so, that's fine. But I think most people are going to go the way I've described it, at least until WotC comes out and says something different. Now, I'm not done yet because it's important to note how this is going to work for us especially. This bonus action attack that we get from the dual wielder feat, the qualifiers for it are simply that we make an attack with the attack action and that the weapon have the light property. If we do that, we get a bonus action attack with a, quote, different weapon, right? So if both of our weapons are light, and we're making attacks with both of them as part of our attack action, like we are doing thanks to the Nick weapon mastery, right? We're making an attack with the Shadowblade, which is light, and then we're making an attack with the Scimitar, which is light, and both of these are made with our attack action. And so this bonus action attack that we get to make thanks to the dual wielder feat, it's made with a different weapon. For us, which is the different weapon here? That bonus action attack should be doable with either of our weapons. You follow me? We made 2 attacks with 2 different light weapons with our action. Which one is considered to be the different weapon that we get to use our bonus action for thanks to the feat? I can't but imagine interpreting this as anything but whichever one we want in this scenario. Feel free to argue about it in the comments, but if this is the case, it means we can make a bonus action attack with our Shadowblade, and that is incredible. for us because it hits so much harder. And it's one of the main reasons why Bladesinger plus Shadowblade is kind of better than ever now. Finally, don't forget, we're character level 5 now. Booming Blade, Green Flame Blade, True Strike, all of our damaging cantrips scale up, right? Even though we're not going to be using any of those blade cantrips much yet, since I would rather make 2 attacks with my action, thanks to Nick, good old Nick, he's so nice giving us extra attacks, than just 1, right? Even if I got to add extra damage from it. Okay. At level 6, we would be a Wizard 5, and we get another new wizard feature here, Memorize Spell. This says that after any short rest, we can replace one of our non-cantrip spells we have prepared with a different non-cantrip spell from our spellbook. Some nice potential utility there. Wizards are the most versatile spellcasters with the biggest spell list. It's where most of their power comes from, and this just adds to that. It's great. Most importantly, though, we get 3rd level spells now. And of course, you should take Fear and or Hypnotic Pattern and or Slow, Fly, Fireball, and a whole host of others. I want them all. 3rd level spells are so good. But if we upcast Shadowblade, it does 3d8 per hit now, and that's a lot. Okay, what about Spirit Shroud? Should we concentrate on that instead? It's also a bonus action to cast, and it requires concentration, but it adds a d8 of damage to all of our attacks, even that offhand scimitar, right? The answer, as it so often is it depends. If you're fighting in dim light or darkness, almost assuredly no, use Shadowblade. You're gonna have advantage on all of your attacks. But if you're not, and if you have a nice magic weapon or 2 especially, then it's for sure worth considering. It depends on the weapon. It depends on the enemy armor class. Versus non-magical weapons, Shadowblade is going to do potentially 6d8 damage on your turn if you're hitting with it twice. Spirit Shroud would do 2d6 for, 2 weapon attacks, plus 3d8, 1 for each attack you land. So it's slightly less total damage. But if you have like a flame tongue short sword or something, then yeah, Spirit Shroud takes the lead, right? Especially in bright light. You decide what's best for you. I don't assume when I crunch numbers that we have magical weapons, unless we've got a class feature or a spell giving us one, like the magic weapon spell, sure. But that alone isn't going to be enough to justify going Spirit Shroud over Shadowblade damage-wise. Okay, so that brings us to our first damage report. As far as what combat looks like for us right now, admittedly, and this has always been a bit of a weakness for a melee-focused Bladesinger, I'll admit, it takes some time to ramp up. On round 1, we're maybe casting Shadowblade and making 2 attacks, one with the Shadowblade, one with the Nick Scimitar. We'll call them Nicky. And then on round 2, we've got to get Bladesong going, right? We probably should have done that on round 1 if we're wading into melee. You decide. On round 1, Bladesong and cast Mirror Image with your action. You do no damage, but your defense looks incredible. Anyways, it's not until round 3 that we're making 2 attacks with our action and then a bonus action attack with our Shadowblade. And that kind of sucks. It does. A lot of fights are over or practically over by round 3. So this might not be your go-to strategy every time, right? Maybe only on fights that look like they're going to be tough and or drawn out. Or hey, let's be honest, you might want to open with Fear or Slow or Hypnotic Pattern on round 1 and just Bladesong and make regular attacks with your weapons. But that's what's so awesome about being a wizard gish. Options. And all of them are great. Anyways, in the interest of stretching that spreadsheet, sure, I'll assume we've got magic weapon on our offhand since it lasts an hour, even though that might be silly in all but extreme cases, and that we're upcasting Shadowblade as a 3rd level spell here, making 2 attacks per round with it and 1 more with Nicky. And I will say this, as painful as it is to not be able to be firing on all cylinders until round 3, weapon masteries make it a lot less painful than it was in 2014, once we get extra attack especially, right? Okay, now, what about advantage? I'm going to assume that we have it. I've got a familiar potentially giving me advantage on 1 attack. I've got 3 uses of my Hill Giant Topple, 3 uses of Lucky, and above all, if I'm fighting in dim light or darkness, those Shadowblade attacks are all made with advantage regardless. You will, for sure, have some attacks that don't have advantage. I just feel like with all our potential sources, it's more likely that we do than we don't. Lower these numbers a bit if you don't. Anyways, if everything hits here, we would be doing 6d8 plus 1d6 plus 16 damage on our turn. And so, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 52 damage per round, and against a 15 armor class, it would be 48 DPR. And that's really great. Compared to other single target 2024 builds, we're outpacing all but the Vengeance Pally at this level, though they're not going to scale nearly as well as we will. And compared to old 2014 builds, we'd be very near the top of tier 1, beating out, yes, even that original Bladesinger 2.0 build, which I feel pretty good about. But the best part is, next level, we are going to be taking a massive jump forward, because at level 7, we would be a Wizard 6, and yes, Bladesingers get what used to be unique, our special extra attack. Valor Bards and Eldritch Knights have since pilfered our special flower status, but that's okay. We don't mind sharing the love. But yes, our extra attack says that we can replace one of those attacks now with a cantrip, meaning we could cast Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade, or sure, True Strike if you can't use those. Though it's hard to imagine being able to use the Bladesinger and not being able to use other older content, but I don't know, maybe at your table, I guess. Keep in mind, with True Strike, we have to use our intelligence modifier for the attack rather than our dexterity. Be nice if they just kind of gave you an option, like with Shillelagh, but it would still be more damage on average to use True Strike, if you can't use Booming Blade, on all but the hardest to hit enemies. This all, though, is assuming, of course, that we can Booming Blade or True Strike with our Shadow Blade. Oh boy, here we go again. Okay, so this is where I said before that I was going to make some assumptions for this build that weren't necessarily in line with rules as written, right? Now, I really try to avoid assuming things that I don't think work as a general rule. That said, my bigger concern when I'm putting these builds together has always been, and I think always will be, what is most commonly done at most tables. Because I want to cast as wide a net as possible with these, right? And build in a way I think most people can use. So, for example, yes, I assume that if we have a familiar and they are alive, that we'll be able to get advantage on our first attack every round, even though technically, rules as written, the familiar is supposed to go after you, and if they take the help action, they give advantage on the next attack made against that target, meaning that more likely than not, it's going to be somebody else enjoying that advantage. But at every table that I've ever played at, and as far as I can tell at most of your tables, the familiar goes on your turn basically and can give you advantage on one attack if they take the help action. It's a heck of a lot simpler and easier to keep track of, and it seems to be kind of the norm. Similarly, both True Strike and these old blade cantrips require that the weapon you use to make the attack and cast the spell, right, the cantrip, have a value of a silver or a copper, and while there are many arguments out there that justify why Shadow Blade should be considered as having a cost, and Jeremy Crawford himself said he would allow it at his table. See the tweet right here. Rules as written, you can't use Booming Blade or True Strike with Shadow Blade because Shadow Blade doesn't have a fixed cost tied to it. But every time I do a poll asking if using Booming Blade or now True Strike with a Shadow Blade is allowed at your table, the vast majority say yes. Look at these recent poll results. It's like 3 times more people say yes than no. And so I'm going to assume that now that we can replace one of our cantrips with an attack, we'll be throwing down Booming Blade with our Shadow Blade for an extra, at this level, D8 of damage. Yeah, all of that talk for a D8 of damage. So yeah, it's not going to skew the numbers by much. If it's not allowed at your table, you're not going to lose a lot of sleep over it. And yeah, at that point, just switch to Spirit Shroud and your damage is almost exactly the same. Though if you're fighting in dim light or darkness and you don't otherwise have advantage, you probably still want to stick with Shadow Blade. And just make 2 attacks with it with your attack. Don't use any cantrip. Okay. Whew. I am done with long-winded explanations today, and excuses, and assumptions. At level 8, we'd be a Wizard 7, and that means we get the Conjure Minor Elemental spell. No! Flip table. Okay, I'm going to try and keep this brief. Yes, we get 4th level spells here. Take Banishment, take Dimension Door, take Greater Invisibility, or Polymorph, or Wall of Fire, but please don't take Conjure Minor Elementals until it gets changed by either Wizards of the Coast or by your DM. I mean, I don't know, at this level, sure, it's actually not that bad. I used this spell on that Valor Bard video from a few weeks ago, and I think we showed pretty definitively how problematic it can be because it scales so dang high so dang quickly. And yet... I mean, largely as a result of this spell, that Valor Bard is going to be sitting at the top of the sustained damage dealer spreadsheet forever, unless Wizards of the Coast changes it. And we can't have that. Look at them up there, just strutting around and gloating. Bladesingers are the undisputed champions of gishes, you pretender. Okay, here's what I'm gonna do. Going forward, when I crunch numbers, I'm gonna do them twice. Once, if you can use Conjure Minor Elementals as it's currently written and are willing to risk not being able to look at yourself in the mirror, and once without. I really do want to see how they compare with like no holds barred, right? Right now, we cast a spell as an action, and that's honestly a little rough. It does require a concentration, of course, but then it does 2d8 damage of cold, acid, fire, or lightning per hit to enemies within 15 feet of us. Also, that area is difficult terrain for your enemies. And yeah, as a 4th level spell, it's not that problematic, especially considering that it's an action to cast. It's the scaling that makes me nervous. Increasing by 2d8 more damage per hit with every level you upcast it. Here's hoping that Wizards of the Coast comes out with a correction to the spell to bring that scaling a little more in line. In which case, yeah, I think I come back and adjust the spreadsheet on this build and on the Valor Bard for that matter, and on the Moon Druid that I have to build using the spell. Can you just let me do it once? And maybe the Scorching Ray / Eldritch Blast, Soarlock, burst damage build, just one time, please. We'll see. All right, at level 9, we would be a Wizard 8, and that means we get another feat, and sure, in the interest of damage overall, we will bump our dexterity here to get us to 20, just in time for our next damage report. Okay. Since last check, we have capped our dexterity, picked up a 4th attack on our turn that we get to add a booming blade damage to, I'll assume, and then, sure, potentially swapped out Shadow Blade for Conjure Minor Elementals. And yeah, at this level, the damage bump from Conjure Minor Elementals is fairly minor. Oh, but under that assumption, sure, let's put that magic weapon on our short sword that we're using in our main hand, right, if we're using Conjure Minor Elementals. That way we could continue to assume advantage, I think, since we've still got our familiar, lucky, our hill giantness plus Vex from the short sword, right? And most of our attacks are going to be made with that weapon. Anyways, under all of those assumptions, against a 10 armor class here, we would on average do 85 damage per round, and against a 16 AC, it would be 81 DPR. And just using Shadow Blade instead of CME is going to be 74 DPR and 68 DPR respectively. So 11 to 13 points of damage less. CME isn't a ton more at this level, and you're giving up your action on round 1 to get your spell going. Depending on the fight, that might not be worth it, especially since you're spending a 4th level spell slot for Conjure Minor Elementals instead of a 3rd for Shadow Blade, right? The point is, either way, you're doing a ton of damage. Even the Shadow Blade version here is outpacing every 2024 build I've done to date, and almost all of the non-third party, non-playtest 2014 builds to boot. So yeah, big surprise, is really good. And that makes me really happy because we get so much more than damage here, my friends. Like at the next level, level 10, when we'd be a Wizard 9 and thus get 5th level spells and can do amazing stuff like Wall of Force to shut down half the battlefield behind an invisible, impenetrable force field, or Hold Monster to paralyze almost any target, or Synaptic Static for fireball-like damage with an amazing debuff to boot. One spell we probably shouldn't take here that I used to bring my hands over on previous Bladesinger builds is Animate Objects. And I'm not super sad to see it go, honestly. It's still a good spell. It can still animate inanimate objects and have them fight for us. It's just not the like no-brainer cast this every time, especially if an enemy isn't resistant to non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage that it used to be. And I mean, arguably the spell is better now, I guess, in some situations at least, since resistance to non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage isn't really a thing anymore in 2024. Yay. I won't go over the details too much here, but I'll just say that, yeah, you're basically animating fewer objects now, and overall your damage is going to be less. But I mean, who am I kidding? We are going to be upcasting either Shadow Blade or Conjure Minor Elementals with that 5th level spell, like the fools that we are, for either 4d8 damage per Shadow Blade hit, or just an extra 4d8 damage per hit with both of our weapons, plus our weapon damage with Conjure Minor Elementals. It's totally balanced. At level 11, we would be a Wizard 10, and as a Bladesinger, we get Song of Defense. This is an okay ability. It lets us use our reaction and a spell slot to reduce damage we take by 5 times the spell slot level. Use shield if it keeps you from getting hit, but if you get crit or you take spell damage or something, this can be nice to have. Don't forget, Booming Blade, Green Flame Blade, True Strike, their damage all increases at this level as well. At level 12, we would be a Wizard 11, and that means we get 6th level Wizard spells, and yes, Mass Suggestion is still as amazing as ever to potentially end a fight before it begins. It still doesn't require concentration. Contingency is always good to have to help you to do exactly what you need to do when you need to do it. I mean, you could conceivably use Contingency to cast Conjure Minor Elementals on myself the next time I roll Initiative or something. Maybe Shadow Blade here with Contingency too, though. That doesn't necessarily target us like Contingency says that the spell is supposed to do, but I think most DMs would allow it. Anyways, super expensive to go that route, but maybe if you wanted to be firing on all cylinders a little quicker, you knew you had an important fight coming up, kind of be a cool combo. One that I would consider here is the new Tasha's Bubbling Cauldron. I really love this spell. It says that with an action, we can summon a cauldron that lasts for 10 minutes, and it produces our intelligence modifier number of common or uncommon potions of our choice. There are a lot of options we could go with here for which potion to use, but my current favorite is to pull out a bunch of potions of growth so that we can drink one to enlarge ourselves and or our allies, right? A la the enlarge reduce spell for 1d4 number of hours, making us large size, but also adding a d4 of damage to all of our attacks. Is it worth a 6th level spell slot? Probably not. Am I going to assume that we're doing it anyways when I crunch numbers? Of course. Silly. At least if we're using Shadow Blade or Spirit Shroud, right? We're only going to have one 6th level spell slot, so if we're using Conjure Minor Elementals, obviously we should use it for that and do 5 boatloads worth of damage every hit. And I mean, hey, if you're summoning a cauldron, you've got 4 potions of growth and they last for like 2-3 hours each. Not a bad idea to drink one yourself and give 1 or 2 to your companions who are using weapons and get a nice little damage bump to all attacks for most of your party for potentially several hours. Worth considering. At level 13, we would be a Wizard 12, and that means we get another feat, and yeah, I think I just bump intelligence here, taking us to an 18. And I'm realizing that I was saying you get 4 potions, knowing that I was going to have an 18 intelligence here in a second. Anyways, bumping our intelligence improves our concentration checks, our armor class, and of course our spell save DC, among other things. Now, I'll admit, I'm tempted to take Warcaster. Having advantage on concentration checks would be awesome. If I had an odd-numbered intelligence score, I'd do it for sure. But I'd personally much rather have a +4 intelligence mod than a +3, and taking Warcaster would just keep us at a 17 intelligence, right? And I'm also not too worried about trying to cast spells with my hands full. Remember, the rules now state that you can draw or stow a weapon as part of a weapon attack that we make. No reason we couldn't draw our scimitar when we needed to make an attack with it and then stow it when we make an attack with our other weapon every round, or even with our free action at the end of our turn, right? Always letting us end our turn with a free hand. And sure, being able to use Booming Blade on an opportunity attack for extra damage on the hit, plus the damage as they move away is awesome, and Warcaster would allow us to do that, but again, I'd rather have an 18 intelligence. That's me. You do you. Regardless, at level 13, it is time for our next damage report. Since last check, we have potentially added the ability to upcast Conjure Minor Elementals to 6d8 per hit, yikes, or Shadow Blade to 4d8 per swing, a little more reasonable, or 2d8 per hit regardless of the weapon with Spirit Shroud, right? But we've also seen a little bump from Booming Blade or True Strike, and even added a d4 of damage to all of our attacks thanks to our Potions of Growth if we're using Shadow Blade instead of Conjure Minor Elementals. And then, as always, we've of course added loads of defensive, utility, and control options because we're a freaking wizard. But against enemies here with a 10 armor class, again assuming Conjure Minor Elementals, on average the damage we would do is 169 per round. And against a 17 AC, it's barely less, 162. And that is beating out any other single target damage dealing build I have ever done, of course. But the Shadow Blade version is still looking fantastic at 106 and 99 damage respectively. And that's beating out most single target damage builds, but not all. I mean, definitely not that Conjure Minor Elementals using Valor Bard, but there are a few others too. Perhaps most notably the new and improved Pact of the Blade Warlock build from a few weeks ago. Takes a slight edge at this level, and I kind of like that, honestly. Keep some competition going. Keep it interesting. Let's see how we fare coming down the home stretch. At level 14, we would be a Wizard 3, and that means 7th level spells, and you might want to pause before taking Force Cage now, as it both requires concentration, unlike before, and has a very expensive material component worth 1,500 gold that gets used up every time you cast the spell. Ouch. I mean, money is kind of growing on trees for most characters, most tables at this level, but that's expensive enough to give pause even to the wealthiest among us, I think. I'd probably instead favor reverse gravity here to just make all of your enemies float up into the sky. Or, sure, I mean, if we're cheating, Simulacrum is still a thing. But we could be upcasting Shadowblade to do 5d8 damage on a hit now, or Spirit Shroud for 3d8, or Conjure Minor Elementals for 8d8. At level 15, we would be a Wizard 14, and we get Song of Victory, and this is like one of my favorite Bladesinger abilities, just because, I don't know, I just really like numbers, I guess. It simply says that we can add our intelligence modifier to the damage of all of our melee weapon attacks, while we're Bladesinging at least, which we should be all of the time, I would hope. If you can't be, make sure you've got some really good control spells and just play like a regular wizard, yeah? At level 16, I mean, now that we've got Song of Victory, I would consider going back to Fighter to end the build. Having Action Surge would be awesome. I wouldn't hate picking up a Fighter subclass either. Eldritch Knight would get us another spell slot bump and make the multi-classing hurt a little less. Psy Warrior would probably be my favorite, mostly for the coolness and the flavor, but we're not building for burst damage. I think I just stay Wizard at this point. That would make us a Wizard 15, and that means 8th level Wizard spells, and just go ahead and PYF here. Maze is awesome, dominate monsters, super potent. Have fun with it. But finally for us, at level 17, we would be a Wizard 16, which means another feat, which would let us bump intelligence to cap it at 20, and that's actually the main reason I decided to stay Wizard, at least for the spreadsheet, so we could get this by the end. And, you know, having a 20 in both intelligence and dexterity just feels kind of awesome. Super solid armor class, fantastic concentration checks, and a maxed out spell save DC to boot. Plus a little more damage thanks to Song of Victory. Good stuff. Oh, and don't forget Booming Blade, Green Flame Blade, True Strike get their final damage increase at this level too. This then brings us to our final damage report. Since last check, we've gained the option of upcasting Conjure Minor Elementals to do a 10d8 damage per hit, lol. Or Shadowblade to do a more reasonable 5d8 per hit with it. Spirit Shroud would be doing 3d8 on both of our weapons. And I suppose we could be upcasting Magic Weapon to give us a +3 to our weapon of choice if we really wanted. And even the Conjure Minor Elementals user could blow a spell slot on getting some Enlarge Potions if they were really just going to blow everything for one encounter. What's more, we've got the really awesome Song of Victory now, and even got a final bump to our cantrip attack damage. Plus, of course, tons more utility and control options. Against an enemy here with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 287 damage per round. This is assuming CME, right? And against an 18 AC, it would be 278. And of course, that's beating out everything ever, except, actually, that Conjure Minor Elementals Valor Bard, since they dipped into Warlock and got some extra attacks via Eldritch Blast to pile on even more Conjure Minor Elementals damage at the end there. Benefits of being a charisma-based caster, I suppose. But hey, the Shadowblade user, they are sitting very pretty at 146 and 136 respectively, which is still in the upper echelons of tier 1 compared to old builds, and well ahead of everyone but, again, the new Blade Lock and Conjure Minor Elementals users when looking at 2024 builds specifically. So really, really solid. Okay, there is a lot to talk about in the final thoughts here. So the tier score for this build, when you take the damage that they did at each of the armor classes that we calculate for at each of the 4 damage reports, just average it into one big number, we end up with a 133 for the Conjure Minor Elementals build, beating out not only that Valor Bard, but even the Cleric of Chaos from a couple of weeks ago that was doing damage to 3 enemies every round. That is the highest sustained damage tier score that we have ever seen, and I love that it's the Bladesinger that got us there. Oh, so much favoritism. But okay, let's forget the CME version of the build. It's not going to work at a lot of tables, maybe most. The tier score for the Shadowblade and or Spirit Shroud version of the build is like 81. And yeah, for those wondering how Spirit Shroud would compare to Shadowblade at these higher levels, as always, Depends on what kind of magic weapon you have, but without magic weapons, basically at 9, Shadow Blade still has an edge. At 13, it's about even, assuming you're casting magic weapon on your main hand, right, instead of this scimitar. And at 17, Spirit Shroud takes a slight lead. It was close enough that I decided to not get into it. I don't want to do 3 damage numbers, right? If you've got a good magic weapon, and or if you can't Booming Blade with a Shadow Blade, then you're going to want to use Spirit Shroud for concentration. Anyways, a tier score of 81 puts us ahead of all non-Conjure Minor Elementals users, except that new Blade Lock and that Moon Druid Bladesinger build that was a lot of fun, if arguably a little tough to sustain, because they'd be getting knocked out of bear form pretty easily, especially at higher levels. So, okay, let's talk about that version of the build here, the more realistic Shadow Blade or Spirit Shroud using version. The Pact of the Blade Warlock had a higher tier score. Does this mean that Warlocks are better Gishes than Bladesingers now? Nah. I mean, importantly, this Bladesinger was outpacing that Warlock build at levels 6 and 9, where most of us are playing the game. And I mean, who gets access to the Shield spell, and Wall of Force, and Fireball? That's right, we do. Not to say that Warlocks don't have advantages of their own. I don't need to get too hung up on trying to make this a competition. This build has flaws, no doubt. The ramp up time can be a huge hurdle. If you play at a table where you can sometimes start your blade song before you roll initiative because you can tell combat's coming, stuff like that, right? It will be a lot less painful. But also, I make some assumptions here that might not fly at your table. Do you have advantage? Can you use a familiar like most people can? Can you use Booming Blade with Shadow Blade? How many combat encounters are you having per day? All of these things can potentially impact the numbers that I'm giving you here. But here's the good news. First of all, even if we need to temper our expectations a bit because of any or all of the above, the damage that you're going to do with this build is still going to be phenomenal. But more important than that, we're a freaking wizard. And that means all of the delicious control and AoE blasting and utility and versatility that being basically a full wizard entails. It's why I love Bladesingers so damn much. You guys know this. Playing one just feels like you can do everything. You dance and weave through your enemies, dealing death to every foe, then turn around and blow up the minions with a well-placed firewall, or lock them down with the power of hypnosis, or by reversing gravity on them while teleporting anywhere you want, or flying there if need be, while being incredibly hard to hit or pin down all the while. It's just so much fun. It is glee-inducing, and if you haven't tried it for yourself, I cannot recommend it more, and especially now with the 2024 update. But that's the build for the week. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you know how much I love you, because I do. You guys are so awesome. Thank you so much for all that you do for me, for the channel. You are the best. I hope you have a great day and a fantastic week. And if you don't, I hope that you will find a reason to hope anyways, because I think there are reasons. You might just have to look for them. I hope that you will do good, and that you will be kind, and that I see you again very soon. But until then, take care. Bye. I say the tragedy is how you're gonna spend the rest of your nights with the light on, so shine the light on all of your friends, when it all amounts to nothing in the end. I won't worry my life away. Hey, oh, I won't worry my life away. Hey, oh. You know, I don't own a single, like, Jason Mraz album. Does anybody own albums anymore? I don't know. I always buy music still from artists that I like. Even in these days of Spotify, I guess my Gen X is showing. Anyways, and yet, every time I hear one of his songs, I'm like, I really like this song. Why don't I own any of his albums? Maybe I should change that. But also, I'll tell you why. It's because one of my best friends growing up, hold on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think I want that. His name's Bucky. He's a great dude. He's also like the quintessential like music hipster, in that, like, I don't know, he always just likes stuff that's kind of obscure and if it ever becomes popular, then he doesn't like it anymore. He might take umbrage with that. But anyways, and he was very influential on my musical tastes growing up. Probably still is, if I'm being honest. And I think anytime there's like a band or an artist that's like pretty popular, I think I hold this like fear or guilt that like, or shame that like if Bucky knew that I liked this song, he would make me feel bad about it. And yeah, that's just a little insight into my own psyche for you. I really like that song, and I really like Jason Mraz, and maybe one day, I'll learn to just like what I like and not care what Bucky thinks. I don't know, though. It's a big ask. All right. I've got my Chat Noir t-shirt on in honor of October 1st today. Oh, my favorite month of the year. I'm so happy. It's not actually October 1st as I'm recording this, but I know that the video's coming out. Is it coming out October 1st? I think it's coming out October 1st. Okay. Hold on. Yeah, October 1st. So, happy October, everybody. Have a black cat. Okay, the camera is not tilted, as far as I can tell, and yet I look crooked. Does my left sleeve just naturally rise up higher than my right one? I don't know. Okay. A scimitar. Oh boy, it's another one of those words that, anyways, people give me a hard time about. A scimitar, non-cantrips, At level 8, we'd be a wizard 7, and that means we get the kind... Dang it, no, I gotta say that better. While teleporting anywhere you want,